Hi, my name is Kim Canali and I'm an Accredited Practising Dietitian currently working at the Food and Mood Centre in Geelong, Victoria, as well as a private practice in Melbourne, specialising in gastrointestinal nutrition such as irritable bowel syndrome and celiac disease. I'd like to thank Free From Allergy for inviting me to talk today about how diet can influence mental health, brain health and gut health, and present to you how food can impact mood and the brain. This emerging area of research, which looks at the relationship and links between diet and mental health, is called nutritional psychiatry. The idea that eating certain foods could promote brain health might seem like common sense, but historically, nutrition research has focused largely on the foods we eat and how they can affect our physical health rather than our mental health. In the presentation, I'll be covering why we should be thinking about mental health, why it is important to think about diet in the context of the brain, what is the connection between food and mood, showing you some research in this area, looking at some of the mechanisms on how diet can impact brain and mental health and gut health, and finishing off with some practical tips on how you can improve your diet. The World Health Organization defines mental health as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. But in contrast to optimal mental health, mental illness can cause distress, impact on day-to-day functioning and relationships, and is associated with poor physical health. Mental health conditions are extremely common. Research says that almost half of Australians will experience a mental health condition in their lifetime, and 1 in 5 people in Australia are currently living with anxiety or depression, which are common mental disorders. Mental illness and substance use disorders are the leading cause of disability globally. The term disability here means an impairment of the body or mind that makes it difficult for a person to do certain activities and prevent them from living a full life. Anxiety disorders are ranked 6th on the list of leading disability causes, and the World Health Organization considers depression to be the greatest contributor to disability worldwide. These statistics really highlight why mental health is important to think about in today's world and to find ways to help prevent and treat these debilitating conditions. But why is it important to think about diet? In the last few decades, there has been major shifts in dietary intakes globally. Not only are we eating less nutrient-rich foods with less vitamins and minerals and fibres, etc., but there's also been a marked increase in the consumption of sugars, snack foods and packaged foods, which are usually high energy foods, and takeaway. Industrialisation of the food system and food processing techniques have made these foods highly affordable, palatable and convenient. These types of foods are widely available and make up most of our food system, including our supermarket shelves and fast food outlets. As a consequence, the high availability of these foods strongly influences the choices that we make, which is why it can be so difficult to eat well. Poor diet is responsible for 1 in 5 deaths worldwide, and this is 1.5 times more than the deaths due to smoking. So let's define a poor diet. When people think about a poor diet, they often think about the high fat and sugar foods and snacks they're eating. However, it's not just about unhealthy foods, but importantly, we're not eating enough of the healthy foods, including fruits and whole grains and healthy fats. Of course, we all know we may be eating too much of the foods on the right, but these foods are certainly okay in moderation. Many people believe having a good diet means having a perfect diet, but this is absolutely not the case. It's just about making sure most of your diet is made up of the foods on the left. In private practice, I see clients who don't really eat a lot of takeaway foods or drink soft drinks or eat a lot of sweet biscuits, but they also don't eat enough of the nutritious foods, so I focus on teaching them how to reach their vegetable and fibre targets. So what percentage of Australian adults actually get enough vegetables every day? What does our current diet look like? This data is taken from 2016, and these graphs show the percentage of adults and children who are meeting the minimum recommended number of serves for the 5 food groups. The 5 food groups being vegetables, dairy, meat, fruit, and grains. We can see from this graph that less than 5% of adults, the purple bar, are consuming enough vegetables on a daily basis. That's 95% of Australian adults are not eating enough vegetables every day. And sadly, less than 1% of children are meeting their vegetable targets and also not meeting adequate amounts of any other food group. When we look at the amount of discretionary foods we are eating, which are foods like cakes, biscuits and chips, etc., Australians are consuming 35% of their kilojoules of calories from these foods every day, and these foods are considered to be of little nutritional value and tend to be high in saturated fats, sugars and salt. So unfortunately, most of us aren't meeting the food group targets that are recommended for health across all the 5 food groups. It's important to note that there are many factors that can contribute to mental health and well-being, such as social and cultural environment, economic factors, etc. So we need to focus on the modifiable factors, that is, things we can change and control, such as diet and exercise. So why does all this matter? Apart from poor diet being associated with a number of health conditions, there is now plenty of research to say that a healthy diet, eating pattern, is not just important for physical health, but also for mental health. Most of us know that a poor diet can make us feel sluggish and tired. However, the research is catching up, showing how strong the link is between food and mood. So let's firstly look at whether food can prevent low mood or mental illness. Since 2009, researchers at the Food and Mood Centre have led many observational studies across countries, cultures and age groups, showing that diet matters to mental health. Better quality diets are associated with reduced depression risk, while unhealthy dietary patterns are associated with increased depression and often anxiety. If someone is following a traditional diet, they are 35% less likely to have a depressive disorder and 32% less likely to develop an anxiety disorder. It's important to highlight that observational studies do have their limitations. It has been difficult to really determine whether symptoms of anxiety and depression cause poor eating habits, or if poor eating habits are causing depression and anxiety. Was it purely a coincidence, and that what they were observing were attributed to other things, like people who had better diets, maybe exercising more or sleeping better? But this data was still incredibly important, as dietary intervention studies are quite difficult to do. However, a landmark intervention study led by Felice Jacka at the Food and Mood Centre was the first study in the world to show that when you change your diet, it can change and improve symptoms of depression, that is, effectively help to treat low mood. This was groundbreaking research, a randomised controlled trial published 4 years ago and is known as the SMILES trial. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about the trial. This study took place over 12 weeks and recruited people who had moderate to severe depression. It's important to point out that interventions were on top of their usual treatments, including medications, if they were already on them. So we're not suggesting that dietary changes should be used as an alternative to medications or any other therapies recommended by the treating practitioners. Participants were randomised into one of 2 groups. Half of the group were placed onto a healthy diet, who saw a dietitian over the course of the 12 weeks, and the other half received weekly support sessions but no dietary advice with a research assistant. The social support sessions, which is a proven psychological treatment, involve participants befriending someone and catching up weekly for the same amount of time that the diet group spoke with the dietitian. This social support comparison group was used to help tell us whether changes in symptoms of depression were due to the effects of social isolation or actually due to the diet itself. And what did the dietitian tell those participants in the diet group? Those in this group were instructed to follow a modified Mediterranean diet called the Med diet, which promoted eating more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, extra virgin olive oil and legumes, as well as allowing smaller amounts of dairy, lean red meat and fish. At the same time, they were encouraged to decrease their intake of highly processed foods such as lollies, fast foods, pastries, and highly processed meats like ham and bacon. Foods that are again high in sugars, saturated fat and salt. Strategies were made to be practical and easy, with small changes made over the entire 12 weeks rather than making them all at once. As part of the study, they developed this food pyramid, which is a great visualization of the diet, with the bottom part in green indicating foods that should be eaten every day, and foods at the top of the pyramid in light green to be eaten weekly, with the recommended amounts listed. So for example, oily fish like salmon was encouraged to be eaten at least twice a week. Now here is a graph showing the depression rating scale on the vertical or y-axis for the social support group at baseline and at the 12-week period. From the results, you can see that those who received social support alongside their normal medical treatment ended up with a reduction in their depression symptoms. But what they found in the diet group was pretty remarkable and beyond their expectations. This SMILES clinical trial showed that a 12-week Mediterranean dietary intervention significantly reduced depressive symptoms in adults compared to the control conditions, that is the social support group. They found almost a third of participants in the diet group had full relief of their symptoms from depression versus only 8% of those in the social support group. And those who had higher improvements in their diet had better improvement in their mental health. Similar results have been published in other studies, with a further 2 Australian studies replicating similar findings. The HealthyMed trial also reported significant reductions in depressive symptoms following an adjunctive Mediterranean diet. And in fact, one of the studies, changes happened over an even shorter amount of time, that is only 3 weeks. The study included young people aged 18 to 35 years and found that not only were they able to change their diet in a short period of time, but also the diet group had significantly lower levels of depression after making dietary changes, and these reductions in depression scores were maintained 3 months later. So in summary, the research is currently saying a healthy diet can reduce risk of developing depression and anxiety, and a healthy diet, specifically the Mediterranean diet in these studies, has been shown to reduce symptoms of depression. So you might be asking yourself, but how does diet influence our mental health? This fantastic diagram is taken from Wolf Marx's review paper in Molecular Psychiatry, providing an overview of what is currently known about the underlying mechanisms of action by which diet may influence mental and brain health, particularly depression. You can see that the mechanisms of action associating diet with depression, whether it's a healthy diet or a Western-style diet, are complex and interacting and not restricted to one pathway. There are numerous key pathways identified whereby diet could affect mental health, so I'm going to describe a few of these pathways in a bit of detail, such as inflammation, oxidative stress, neurogenesis, and the gut microbiota. The first mechanism by which diet may influence mental and brain health, which I'll talk about, is by changing the pathway involved in inflammation. Inflammation is an activation of the immune system caused by stress, such as psychological stress, and other factors such as lack of physical activity, lack of sleep, and smoking. Our body then makes these inflammatory molecules, such as cytokines and prostaglandins, that can then change our physiology related to mood disorders. Now, short-term inflammation is the result of the body's response to injury or infection, and that's needed for healing. However, what is seen is this increase in low-level chronic inflammation long-term, which can lead to symptoms of depression. About 1 in 4 patients with mental health conditions display this increased level of inflammation. But healthy dietary patterns and individual dietary components, such as omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols, those beneficial plant-based compounds, have demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties that may be relevant to mental health disorders. Both longitudinal observational studies and clinical trials in populations with chronic metabolic disease show that adoption of a healthy dietary pattern, such as the Mediterranean diet, reduces this systemic inflammation. Another pathway by which diet could affect mental health is by influencing oxidative stress in the body. Oxidative stress is the imbalance of oxidative and antioxidative processes that can lead to damage to our cells, including our DNA. Persistent oxidative stress is a pathway that may lead to mental health conditions. A meta-analysis of 115 studies reported that people with depression had elevated oxidative stress markers as well as lower antioxidant markers when compared to healthy individuals. Due to the high oxidative stress load reported in people with mental disorders, increasing diet quality may be a viable intervention for building up antioxidant defenses. We know that vitamin C and vitamin E have antioxidant properties, so foods containing high levels of these would be encouraged, such as fresh fruit and vegetables and plant-based oils, nuts, and seeds which contain high levels of vitamin E. Animal studies suggest that high-fat Western-style diets can increase markers of oxidative stress, whilst healthy diets show a reduction in these markers. Another pathway by which diet may influence brain and mental health is a pathway involved in a region of the brain called the hippocampus. This is an area in the brain that has a central role in learning, memory formation, mood, and mental health. This region of the brain can change in size, a process known as brain plasticity, where new neurons are formed in the brain, that is neurogenesis. A key factor that determines neurogenesis is the brain protein BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. These brain proteins are important in depression. They can protect the brain against oxidative stress and promote the growth of new brain cells. Lower levels of BDNF have been found in individuals with depression, and unhealthy diets, that is high in sugars and refined carbohydrates, etc., have been linked to a smaller hippocampus. However, there is compelling evidence that BDNF and adult neurogenesis can be modulated and changed through diet. Animal models have suggested a beneficial effect of dietary components, again such as omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols, and that Western-style diets can impair this neurogenesis, lower these brain protein levels, and as a consequence, have a negative impact on memory and learning. The final pathway and mechanism of action which I'll discuss today involves the gut microbiome. There is growing evidence that the gut microbiome or gut microbiota are involved in regulating physiological processes, including cognitive function, mood disorders, and behaviour via the microbiota gut-brain axis, which I'll discuss shortly. I like to think of the gut microbiome as an ecosystem, kind of like a rainforest. Our gastrointestinal tract has evolved where all different types of microbial communities live, such as bacteria, fungi, and viruses. These collections of microorganisms are termed microbiome or microbiota, and they coexist with other human cells in the lower intestine. Now, these microorganisms, mainly comprising bacteria, are involved in functions that are critical to our health and well-being. Whilst we provide the bacteria with shelter and food, these bacteria help us by digesting the food we eat, pulling nutrients out of food and helping to make nutrients too. They help keep our gut wall intact. And then these gut bugs are also involved in other important processes that extend beyond the gut, such as interacting with our immune system, being involved in metabolism and body weight. And the gut microbiome also produces brain chemicals such as serotonin that have an influence on brain function and mood. So how do the gut and the brain communicate? The gut-brain axis refers to this network of connections involving multiple biological systems that allows the bidirectional or two-way communication between the gut, bacteria, and the brain. This axis is crucial in maintaining a balance of the gastrointestinal system, central nervous system, and microbial system of animals. Now, the gut microbiome presents a critical pathway in the connection between diet and cognitive function and mental health. Data from animal models suggests that there is a direct link between diet, the microbiome, and mechanisms involved in depression. Studies have shown that changes in the gut microbiome driven by diet can lead to behavioural changes that mimic symptoms of anxiety and depression. It's also been shown that Western-style diets, high in fat, can result in increased anxiety-like behaviours and decreased memory. And prebiotic supplementation with fructooligosaccharides and galactooligosaccharides reversed chronic stress-induced changes in the gut microbiome and normalised those pro-inflammatory cytokines and depressive-like behaviours. Although the exact mechanisms of how the gut bugs influence brain health still need further research, it's been proposed that there are multiple direct and indirect communication pathways via the gut-brain axis. This signalling or bidirectional communication between the gut and the central nervous system can occur through a number of different pathways. It can occur through the immune system. It can also occur through metabolite production, and by this I'm particularly referring to short-chain fatty acids. When fibre-rich foods are consumed regularly, the gut bacteria produce these short-chain fatty acids such as butyrate and acetate, which are byproducts of fermentation. Short-chain fatty acids have shown to be extremely beneficial for the gut as they are food for the colon and produce a healthy mucus layer in the large bowel. They've also been shown to provide a number of positive health benefits within the bowel, including reducing gut inflammation and sensitivity, strengthening the immune system in the gut, and offering protection against intestinal infections. The gut bacteria can also regulate the production of neurotransmitters important in mood, again such as serotonin and dopamine, as well as the brain proteins that influence the growth of the brain cells such as BDNF, which I've mentioned before. So in the case of depression, gut bacteria are likely influencing brain function through these pathways by potentially altering inflammation, changing metabolism and short-chain fatty acid production, and altering those neurotransmitters important in mood. So you can see that depression really is a whole body disorder rather than just a brain disorder. So there are many factors that can affect our gut microbiome, including our environment where we live, our genetics, medications, particularly antibiotics, our hygiene practices, how much exercise we do, how much sleep we get, and stress and illness. And obviously one of the major factors that can have an enormous and significant impact on our gut microbiome is our diets and the foods we consume. Research has shown that diet has the ability to quickly shift the type of bacteria in our gut, even though the major composition of our microbiome stabilizes in the first few years of life. But what is a healthy gut? The term gut health is being widely used today, but really there's no exact or consensus definition. Research papers have suggested that gut health is defined by the absence of gastrointestinal symptoms, such as abdominal pain and diarrhea, the absence of disease, such as inflammatory bowel disease or colon cancer, the absence of unfavourable conditions, such as increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut, as well as the deficiency or excess of short-chain fatty acids. There's so much about the microbiome that we're yet to fully understand, so for this reason, it's very difficult to say exactly what makes up a healthy gut and healthy gut microbiome. However, at the Food and Mood Centre, we tend to think based on the existing evidence that having lots of different, diverse types of bacteria living in our gut is probably a good thing. Such diversity may mean that our gut is in a better position to fight and resist bad bugs and pathogens. There is also growing evidence showing that metabolic response to meals are highly individual, suggesting that the best diet for one person may not be so for another. So there may be a wide range of microbiome profiles that are considered healthy or normal. Because of this complexity, there is no one optimal gut health diet, so be cautious if one food or one diet is promoted as being the best for gut health. There's an article in The Conversation written by Dr. Heidi Studaker and Dr. Amy Lohman from the Food and Mood Centre if you'd like to read more about the term gut health and what it may mean. The research into the mechanisms of just how diet can change mood is still in its infancy. However, there are many areas of research which have been proposed to try and change the microbiome in order to target mental health conditions. These areas include whole diet interventions, such as traditional dietary patterns, prebiotic and probiotic supplements as microbiome targeted interventions, individual nutrient supplementation with vitamins or the powerful antioxidant zinc, omega-3 fatty acids or specific amino acids. Studies are starting to emerge to suggest that some of these supplements may be helpful, but under certain circumstances. And then you have fermented foods such as kimchi, sauerkraut, or kombucha. Strong clinical evidence is lacking, but watch this space in terms of the research coming out and learning what dietary patterns, supplements, and potential foods that may be beneficial for the individual. So you're probably asking yourselves what diet is best for optimal mental health and gut health. There are many nutritional components of a healthy dietary pattern, not just specific foods. The good news is that there is no one specific diet to optimize brain and gut health. Although the Mediterranean diet has been the subject of recent studies showing that it can treat depression, research from all over the world in different countries and cultures have shown that a healthy traditional dietary pattern, for example the Scandinavian diet or Japanese diet, is associated with a reduced risk of depression and anxiety and reduces symptoms of depression. Although these diets may seem quite different, they actually have some important things in common. Traditional diets generally include plenty of plant-based foods and whole foods, and healthy fats from oily fish such as salmon or mackerel, nuts, seeds, and olives. Essentially, these traditional diets are better quality diets and nutrient-rich, and associated with a richer and more diverse gut microbiome, which helps support immune function and reduce inflammation. Plant foods are high in fibre, so by increasing your intake of fibre-rich foods, your gut bugs will be making those metabolite short-chain fatty acids, which help to keep our gut barrier healthy and act as signalling molecules to the brain. Aim for 3 cups of veggies, including salad veggies, every day, and 2 to 3 pieces of fruit every day. You'll also be increasing your intake of beneficial polyphenols, also found widely in plant foods, which help to promote a healthy, diverse microbiome. Nuts and seeds are also rich in polyphenols as well as extra virgin olive oil. Research has shown that extra virgin olive oil promotes the growth of beneficial bacteria in the gut and potentially prevents the growth of harmful bacteria. Aim for 3 to 4 tablespoons for the full health benefits. You may have heard the term eat a rainbow, which encourages all of us to eat different fruits and vegetables, promoting a variety of plant foods of different colours, so that you get the full range of all the different phytochemicals and polyphenols. Spices such as curcumin, tea, red wine and cocoa also contain high levels of polyphenols. Those traditional dietary patterns are also based on consuming whole foods with minimal processing, and by this I mean there is a minimal intake of ultra-processed foods. The NOVA system is one system that classifies foods into 4 categories depending on the level of processing they've undergone. An ultra-processed food means that the food has undergone these multiple processes which result in little, if any, intact whole foods being present in the final product. So basically the end product is far removed from the original product, like these broccoli chips. And in this system, an ultra-processed food typically contains 5 or more ingredients, and they may also contain food additives such as colours, flavours and processing aids. Research has shown that eating higher amounts of these ultra-processed foods is linked with many health conditions, including depression. But it's important to remember that you don't need to completely eliminate these foods. They have a place in our diets as an occasional food, but unfortunately we're eating too much of them. Modified foods such as frozen or tinned veggies are absolutely fine, but a lot of products are promoted as being healthy alternatives, but they're actually ultra-processed with added sugars and salts and very little fibre and real nutrients. So in theory it seems relatively easy to follow this dietary pattern, but in real life there are various barriers which can stop us from eating well. And these include the food environment where there's widespread availability of these ultra-processed foods, and ads for these are everywhere. Then there's the lack of knowledge and skills on how to plan, prepare, cook and shop for all of these foods. But here are some practical tips to overcome some of these barriers. We're all pretty much time poor these days, so one of the key things I focus on in private practice is putting some time aside to plan their meals and snacks for the week and to have these nutritious basic pantry, fridge and freezer staples at home. This can save you time in the supermarket and you're less likely to spend because you're not picking out foods on the spot. So when you go shopping, buy foods like frozen and tin varieties of fruits, vegetables and legumes and lentils such as 4-bean mix, chickpeas, red kidney beans, as well as tin fish such as salmon, because they're often cheaper than fresh varieties, so you don't have to buy fresh all the time to get the most benefit. Pasta, brown rice and quinoa are also staples of mine. By having some basic pantry, fridge and freezer staples, it allows you to produce a meal around those foods anytime. Also, have a list of your go-to meals such as simple frittatas, stir fries and curries. Your meals do not have to be fancy. There are some recipes out there that only require 5 ingredients. And also remember that, takeaway is okay. Salads, wraps, sandwiches, rice paper rolls, veggie tacos, etc. Just try to limit those fried foods and high salt foods. Another tip to overcome not having a lot of time to prepare veggies is if you have 10 to 15 minutes to spare, meal prep ahead of time. This can be a real time saver for the evening, especially if you're juggling a few things like helping with homework or sport commitments after school. It can take that pressure off. And this can be certainly a more expensive option, but sometimes buy pre-cut veggies if you know you're going to have a really busy week. Cook a little extra and freeze also for busy times, remembering to include lots of veggies in your casseroles or slow cooker meals. Tired looking veggies can be added to soups, casseroles or be roasted, which will help up your veggie intake and meet your needs. Here are some ideas on how to increase your intake of fruits and veggies and healthy snacks with high fibre and polyphenol swaps for each meal and snack, remembering that it does take some planning and food preparation. So for breakfast, instead of a bacon and egg McMuffin, you might want to have a whole grain muffin with poached egg, and some tomato and spinach on the side, and there's the vegetables. Or you might have porridge, low-fat milk and berries. For morning tea, instead of a packet of chips, you might want to have some nuts, which gives you that crunch, or veggie sticks and hummus. For lunch, instead of a burger and chips, having some lentil soup and whole grain bread roll, tuna and salad and whole grain crackers. For afternoon tea, instead of juice and cake, having some fresh fruit or dried fruit, also some whole grain crackers, avocado, there's those healthy fats, and cheese. For dinner, you might want to have, instead of a meat lover's pizza, having that baked salmon, those omega-3 fatty acids, stir-fried veggies with extra virgin olive oil and brown rice for high fibre. And for dessert, have some canned fruit, some Greek yogurt, or a piece of dark chocolate. I will say here that if you're currently following a low FODMAP diet, you may not be eating any onion, garlic or legumes, which are high in prebiotic fibres, or you may also be avoiding wheat and many fruits and vegetables. My recommendation would be to see an experienced dietitian for phase 2 of the low FODMAP diet, that is the reintroduction or re-challenge phase, if you haven't already, to test your tolerance or threshold to these foods so that you can enjoy them in limited amounts in your diet. With all of my clients, I've been able to gradually build up their tolerance to foods they enjoy without getting symptoms or minimal symptoms, and increase these nutritious foods in their diet. I also focus on what you can eat rather than what you can't, and it's also important to be realistic. Focus on one goal a week. You might not be a fruit eater, so your goal would be to have a piece of fruit 3 times a week, or you've never tried legumes before, so having a side dish of legumes at a meal. Also, it's really important to acknowledge that changing your diet is hard work. We all have habits and do what is familiar to us. This is even more important for people with a mental health condition like depression, because they may be experiencing fatigue and a lack of motivation. So taking small steps and changing one habit at a time is often the best way to make long-lasting and sustainable changes. So take-home messages. This emerging area of nutritional psychiatry has shown that diet is of relevance to mental, brain and gut health. There is growing evidence supporting the potential use of dietary interventions as a preventative and adjunctive treatment for depression and anxiety. And our diverse, plant-rich diet based on whole foods is best for brain and gut health. But what we really need are more intervention studies testing the efficacy of dietary improvement as a treatment for these mental health conditions. Before I go, I'd like to let you know about a dietary intervention trial at the Food and Mood Centre currently running for people with both irritable bowel syndrome and depression or anxiety. A high number of individuals with IBS have a common mental disorder coexisting with their gut symptoms. The aim of the study is to look at the impact of a specific diet in people with IBS and current symptoms of anxiety or depression. And this 6-week study will be conducted entirely online with a video call at the start and end of the study, along with weekly support phone calls for both the intervention and control groups. So if you'd like to find more about the trial, please go to the Food and Mood website page listed or email the address here. Also, if you're wanting to learn more about how mental health can be improved through diet and nutrition, the Food and Mood Centre have developed a free 3-week course online. The centre are currently not running the course, but will be in the future, so please register your details for when it becomes available. I'd like to thank these people, particularly Heidi Studacker and Sophie Marnie, for the use of some of their slides and assistance in preparing this presentation. And if you're not already following the Food and Mood Centre on social media, you can find them on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Thank you for listening.